Talk about the process of how the sausage is made. How do your rooms work, and talk about some of the influences that have, led you to the particular ways that you like to work. Carlton, you've been doing this a while. Let's talk about how you did it on Bates Motel.
The first season of Bates Motel was a little bit different because we had a tremendous amount of lead time. So Carrie, Aaron, my partner, and I, who do the show together, we did most of the writing in the first season ourselves. So we had a wonderful writer named Jeff Wadlow who said, I have this deal to write this movie at Universal, and I'm going to direct it, and we're thinking, that's never going to happen. And then like a month in, it's like, I turned my script in, and they're letting me direct the movie. Bye-bye. So he left to go do Kick-Ass 2, coming soon to theaters near you. And then we had a couple of other writers who worked with us briefly, but we basically did it. But this year we actually have a real writer's room, and that's kind of awesome. But normally, you try to have, like, in my opinion, like 6 to 8 or 9 writers, more than that, and it just becomes hard for everybody to kind of weigh in and try to get people with different ideas, different opinions, different points of view, and try to kind of put that all together in a way that is, where the sum is greater than the total of the parts.
And I wanted to mention also, thank you, Carrie was going to join us tonight, but she had a family situation that came up, so she apologized. She was going to join us. Rob, talk about...
I only came here to see what she was going to say, so I'm going to...
Me too, this was great. We have we have a very non-traditional room at elementary in that there's not much of a room at all. I've always, personally, my process has always been a little more introverted. And even when I was at shows that were very room-based, I felt that I would make the most progress when I split off for a few hours, worked in my own office, and then came back to the room, making sure I had something to present and sort of pick through. And so, because this was my first proper solo showrunning experience, I tried to build a room system around that. So a lot of the other writers will get together. It gives me time to sort of work on, on things that I want to work out, stories that might arc over the course of a season or a particular, character story in an episode, while a lot of the other staff can work on cases, because of course we are, at the end of the day, we are a procedural show. The cases are standalone. We always, it's a little easier to break people up into what we call independent study. A lot of writers can sort of, decide this is an area code that I like, and I'm going to work on this all day, and we'll talk about it, before we go home tonight. So, first year we had to do a lot of that. I would say there was a lot more independent study than maybe everyone would have liked. But coming into a second season, it's such a different story. You have, at least in our case, there's 24 hours worth of, proof of concept that we don't have to worry about at this point. Everyone has a sense of the show, and at least so far in the second season, we're getting a little more time together.
Joel, talk about The Americans. You had such an intricate plot with all the espionage and everything.
I think one thing for us is hire great people to work with. So we were really lucky in that we were able to con Josh Brand into coming to New York and consulting for us, and also found some great new writers, New York playwrights who were able to come in and help out. And Joe Weisberg, who created the show, and learned from Graham Yost, who's one of the best. So we had a very small group, but a really good group. And we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the season just talking about the characters and about the themes and about what we wanted to explore. But it was funny, I was actually kind of moved by what Michael Patrick King said about letting writers write. And that's something we worked really hard to do as well. So, for example, we worked on story a lot, and we talked about story, and we talked about moves, but we never sat in the room and broke every move of every story into cards with every move inside every scene. We sort of talked about the big pieces and worked on very thin, strong beat sheets, and then let writers build from there, and then sort of had much more of a back and forth process where we would weigh in and discuss and expand rather than doing everything collectively.
Oh, interesting, with the plot that intricate, that's an interesting process. Aaron, talk about Suits.
Well, I had an interesting background. I started as a writer's assistant for a long time in the comedy world. So I was kind of raised on a writer's room, 10 people, working on a screen. We don't exactly do that on Suits, but it was my basis for, it was the only thing I ever knew. So we have a writer's room, and I would say we're in season 3, so it's changed a little bit. But coming into this year, we were actually a little bit behind on post from last year, so I was in the edit bay. And the writers came up with, they did an amazing job. They broke pretty much the arc of the season, which they would pitch to me, and I would, have tweaks now and then. But they really did an amazing job, and they have great story ideas, and they come up with the general gist of what we're going to do. And then we'll break stories kind of halfway. We'll put cards up, and I don't think we intricately break every scene, but we break an episode with cards. The writer will go off and write it, and then we do a little bit of a rewrite process. It's kind of like a mini room. Me and the writer and maybe one other writer will do another pass at it afterwards, and that seems to work out for us.
Gotcha. Kevin, can you talk?
Well, it's different. I kind of agree with Carlton. The 8's sort of the magic number for me in terms of just sort of the number of writers in the writer's room. And, well, first-year shows are so different from second-year shows. And I find first-year shows extremely difficult, and it's mainly because it's me. I'm probably the problem. Is, because you sell a show, you get a pilot, you pick it up, you have to write a sales document and a series document.
Which is complete bullshit. It's,
yeah, and so and I kind of know what the show is, sort of, and I kind of know what attracted me to it, why I created this character, what the major overall theme I want to deal with, because I'm usually wrestling with something in my own life, and then I break out the tent poles, but I like, this is a thriller, so it's very twisty, and I sort of have some big ideas, and then I've got some twists, and I see all these little moments, and I've got like a whole graveyard of spare parts that I know are going to work their way in there some kind of way. But then you set the writers down, and it takes me around 5 episodes to figure out what the show is, and then you're behind, and you've got all these writers, and you spend half the time just having fun instead of working. That's just my process in the beginning, which is not the right process, because clearly these people will know better. But I sit in there, and then we break the stories. We do break them beat by beat. It's a 6-act structure. It's a thriller. It really rests on its pace and its tone and its twists and turns. And then you have to make sure that you can make it emotional, because if it's an emotional, who gives a shit? So there's all this stuff going on at once. And you hire a bunch of great people to sort of help you through it. And sometimes you have to write an episode to discover what it's not, or what it should be. And then you have to re-break it and rewrite it. No, episode 5 really should be episode 5 and 6. So now you got to, and now guess what? It shoots next week. And
yeah, because the networks, and they want you to come up with these documents, but you don't really know what you can't, because you don't know what the show is until you make the show. And the first year is really about figuring out what the show is. And I kind of think, I liken the first year of a show to like putting out an apartment building fire with a garden hose. You're
Right.
you're just kind of trying to survive each episode, and you're trying different things. Then eventually something clicks in your brain. You go, oh, that's the paradigm. That's what makes an episode of The Following, or of Bates Motel, or of The Americans, or whatever. That's you kind of get to that point, and suddenly you see it. But you can't jump that. You just have to get there.
But that's first year. Don't you agree? Second year shows, I just left the writer's room today, and I was like, oh, this is so much easier. We've been in there we're on week 3, and we're just sitting in the room. We've got, the whole season's sort of mapped out. The whole first 5 episodes are kind of broken, and I'm like, wow, I'm home. I'm going home at 6 o'clock. This is so cool. Which is my new
Seriously?
rule. But
I envy
I have
you.
I have a new rule. 6 o'clock out. That's my new rule.
I'm gonna come work on The Following.
I'm starting. No,
gonna
listen,
say, yeah.
guys. I have a reputation. That first year of Vampire Diaries almost killed me. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm staring at the poor writers, and they're like, "Can we go home? We have children." And I'm like, "Oh, right, they have kids." I got the worst reputation, so now I send everyone home at 6. It's my new rule.
How much, though, I'm curious if the other shows, as Aaron said, usually he and another writer will take a pass at the script. Do the scripts from the staff writers go through your computers, or do you bring a couple of other voices to once the drafts are in, to look at them? I'm curious about that process.
I would say, again, right now I only have our first season to speak to. I look forward to a second season that I hope is a little smoother. But in the very beginning, it was hard to really give the writers an honest to goodness first pass at their script. In other words, to get the material in time, give it a read, collect notes, and give it back to them for a second pass. I think we were better at it in the very beginning. As the year went, on, and CBS, God bless them, kept ordering more episodes. It got harder and harder to do. So I think there was more of you had to pull that person into your process. There were moments where you'd sit with someone at a computer and sort of pick your way through a scene, and or split up work. I'm going to work on teaser 1, you start to work on Act 2.
God bless CBS. They'd be like, Rob, do 35. 35 episodes.
You think you're kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
That's the CW. 20? Can you do 24?
Yeah.
And Kevin, of course, you have a couple other shows in your
Well,
your
I
back
have
pocket to
I have
work on.
Julie Plec in my back pocket, and she's the genius of genius everything. She's my Earth mother, and I love her. And she's sort of Manning Vampire and the originals and all that stuff. So she's busy too. So.
Gotcha. One thing, of course, it was referenced in the comedy panel, but one thing you just can't escape these days is how much sort of extracurricular activity there is around TV shows these days with Twitter and social media, and the networks try to seed that as much as possible. Does that put additional pressure on you as writers? Does that change the way you kind of shape your stories? It feels like there's so much discussion while the show's on, after the show's about, oh, this was a slow show, this was boring, I didn't buy that plot twist. Is that in your mind as you're pacing and plotting now, that there's so much discussion?
Carlton and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand, because it seems like Lost was the inflection moment where those two things met. For us on The Americans, it's been the opposite. It's been really fun and liberating. I don't know how you guys have felt, but we came to call it the mega brain. And in a way, like coming out of theater where you would give a performance, and then you move into television and you work hard and you write these scripts and you make your show and you're sitting in a dark editing room and you're kind of in a vacuum. And before social media, you would get the ratings, but the ratings are this cold calculus that today apparently means a lot less, because now you get the ratings, then you get the live +3, and then you get the live +7, but apparently that doesn't matter. But you would get what we came to call the mega brain, which is the day after your episode airs, there are these really smart, interesting comments and thoughts about what you've been thinking about character and about plot, and some tap into your Jungian subconscious. You didn't even realize you were thinking these things. Some things you wished you had been thinking that they credit you with which are the best. So for us, it's been great, actually.
Well, it's tough too, though, because we were mid-season, so we couldn't really correct all. It's helpful. It really is. A lot of the stuff people, whether the tweets or the blogs or this, some of it's so insightful, some of it's great, some of it's like, oh my God, they get me. And then sometimes you're like, what a blowhard, go, get out of your basement, get a job, and then, but then you're like, okay, there's really saying something that really hurt you. What is it? And then, you look for, so it's very helpful. And it can be hurtful, but it's helpful. But you can't, we sucked because we couldn't correct anything, because we were up to episode 11 when it all aired. And so, but it's nice. I actually like it. It's fun. It makes the job more fun for, writers, I think, for me anyway.
You had a lot of experience with that on Lost. What has it been like on Bates Motel?
Well, I live tweeted Bates Motel with my mother. Right.
You had to follow up your Damon podcasts with something.
My mom had a lot of interesting comments about Bates. You can just go back and look at my Twitter feed and you'll see. But enough said about her.
But do you think? Do you feel a pressure to put more, not bells and whistles, but plot twists, more big moments in a show just because there's so much immediate scrutiny on there, or is it?
I think that we just live in a different world where, when you create a show, you're sort of managing a brand, and it extends out beyond just the show, and you have to be somewhat conscious of that. But the first thing you do is you have to attend to the mothership, the show. If the show isn't good, then nobody cares. No one's going to be writing, mega brain articles about how awesome The Americans is. But then people get hooked into it, and they want more, and they want additional content, and they want connection and feedback. And someone like Shonda Rhimes does an amazing job of connecting with her audience through Twitter. And I think that in a way, as showrunners, we have all these new obligations to kind of find ways to meet our audience in on these other media platforms. And it's hard because the job is so consuming all by itself. But then you feel like, well, yeah, I should be on Twitter. I should be trying to communicate. We should be trying to do other things to engage the audience. And we did a lot of that on Lost, and I still enjoy doing it. It's just finding time to do that doesn't come at the expense of the show.
Or your life, I'm sure.
Right.
That too. Yeah, gotcha. Aaron, you're knee deep in production right now. Is it the kind of thing? Is it at all in your mind as you're putting episodes together, or is it something you?
Not too much. I mean, I do tweet on occasion, not as much when we're deep in production. Sometimes it's when you're airing episodes and you're already finished making them. I am going to be live tweeting with Carlton's mom, one of our shows.
She's totally available.
That would be fantastic. No, but I follow Twitter. We get a lot of, for the most part, positive feedback, and I love it. Sometimes you get negative feedback.
At last, a show that's not scary, and then I can follow.
Yes, exactly.
It's funny.
But what we try to do is, look, if I get negative feedback, obviously I don't love it. But if you listen to too many outside voices, whether it's Twitter or whatever it is, you kind of have to look inside and do what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to lose the voice of the show. So you're going to be affected a little bit by anything you're exposed to. But I try not to cater to what a massive fan base is saying.
Kevin, I have to admit that when I watched the following pilot, I did a little bit of this because it was an intense pilot, and the show got more so. I found it was really interesting.
Except towards the end.
Yeah, a little matter of a little cliffhanger that you put in there. But I found it interesting that leading up to the premiere, Kevin Riley of Fox was very open about the fact that he felt like that cable television had raised the bar with intensity and drama so high that broadcast couldn't be held to a different standard and really needed to push the envelope. Was that something that was part of the formulation of that show, or was that?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I don't know anything about. He just says what he's the president. He can say whatever he wants to say. I was like, well, it's really a thriller. It's meant to sort of be this really fast-paced, thriller, and so crafty and twisty and fun, and it's the whole gimmick of the show, and it's really hard to put together, and and it's huge. We're shooting like 100 scenes this episode. It's just a big, massive episode. But he started talking about all that stuff. I'm like, great. He wanted to do a limited 15. That was sort of directed by Kevin Bacon.
Kevin, or was that Kevin Bacon?
That was Kevin Bacon. He
Yeah.
was looking to do a cable show, and I, and this was always sort of, I was like, well, I didn't see this as a 22 episode show for sure. I thought the only way that it would really sort of thrive is if it was a reduced amount of episodes. And so when Kevin sort of demanded the 15 episodes, I was like, okay, this is really good. So this is going to look good. And then I think, Kevin Riley has always wanted to sort of, he was moving in that direction anyway. I think he saw the future of if you're going to do a serialized television, that it's probably best served from a quality standpoint if it's reduced. A reduced number.
Yeah, God bless you, Rob. It is so hard to do 24 episodes and keep the quality bar high.
We didn't keep the quality bar.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
The
I'm a
first
huge
step
fan.
is forget about quality. It's no. You're very kind. It was. I mean, it happened so slowly. I mean, I remember telling friends that I was psychologically prepared for 13 episodes, including the pilot. If we can just get through 13. And then it got to a certain point when we saw people were watching the show. And again, psychologically prepared myself for 22, thinking ahead and not trying to jinx anything. But then we were lucky enough to get this Super Bowl slot, which, I had all of 30 seconds to celebrate and sort of jump up and down in my office. And,
How did you pick that episode?
how did we pick the episode?
Yeah, because you had a sort of a different killer. It was a little more in your face.
It was interesting in that to a certain degree because that real estate is as valuable as it is. It was sort of like doing the pilot again. It was so many people who had sort of dropped away, not out of disinterest, but because they had other responsibilities at the studio network. Everybody kind of reappears and wants to to weigh in, make sure that they're that again they are spending their money wisely, that we're going to put something there that they think is appropriate. I remember like some of the early they weren't marching orders, but they were strong suggestions. Was try to keep it light. People are having fun. It's in New Orleans, and I feel like I don't know how it happened, but I think we told one of the darkest episodes of the season.
It was one of the darker episodes, and it was really great.
It was
I loved the killer.
Thank you so much. It was like I said, it was a strange process, and at a certain point, again, because there's so much scrutiny and there's so many people sort of reappearing and weighing in, it slowed things down to a certain point where we did have to rush through that story a little bit. I loved it. I really liked the episode, but it was looking back like maybe we could have, with a little more time, maybe we would have crafted something truly Super Bowl appropriate, whatever that may mean.
Had you written the story? Had you done the outline of that episode before you got the call? Oh, by the way, you're going to be on Behind the Super Bowl.
No, and that was sort of that was a difference between the pilot process and then that Super Bowl episode. With the pilot, I always had a story that I was pitching and trying to sell, and I had an understanding of how the franchise should work. This was bringing everyone in at the story level. Everybody was sort of weighing, and a lot of it, at least in the beginning, was about was casting built around who are the actors that are out there that we want to see on this network at this time. Who can we sort of lure in? We got wonderful actors, but as far as stunting, it was really difficult because our episode was shooting between, it was bookending our holiday break and many actors' holiday breaks. So we had a lot of people turning us down just because they had plans and they couldn't commit to both sides of it. But it slowed things down for a while because you start to wait on lists and you make offers and you see who's going to do it. And as people start to fall away, you have to change the story to minimize that character in the episode. Ultimately, it was great. We were excited. It was such an honor. It was exciting to craft a story for the episode, but it was difficult. Like I said, it was a strange sort of speed bump to hit in the middle of the season before we could get back to the business of wrapping up the first year.
For the shows for like The Americans and Suits and the following, I mean, these are again very intricate plots that build toward a very specific storyline. How much? Kevin, you were candid about figuring out the show. How much, when you sat down for season 1 of The Americans or plotting season 2 of Suits, which had a big reveal, at the very end of this past season in terms of your main character and his identity as not quite a lawyer, how much of that comes together at the very outset of the season, and how much do you wiggle around as you're writing and shooting episodes?
For us, we made a lot of decisions. I think we thought we knew everything, and about half of it held, and about half of it changed as the characters and story told us something different as we wrote. So I'd say it was an unintentionally hybrid process. Had you asked us when we started shooting or when we were kind of halfway through the pilot reshoots where the characters and story were going, we could have told you definitively where everything was going, and we would have been half right. So, so we knew all along what was happening with Nina, for example. But the dynamic between Philip and Elizabeth, their relationship progressed much differently than we expected.
And is that what the actors brought to it, or was it just as you really got into the nitty-gritty of writing?
It was as the story unfolded, I think in part maybe as we saw the characters playing together, but I think more as the scripts came in and we realized that they needed more time together, and then they needed more time apart. We didn't expect them to stay. We didn't expect them to split up exactly as early as they did, and we didn't expect them to stay apart as long as they did. I think we were afraid that with them apart, something special in the show would diminish. And ironically, because the show was exploring marriage and relationships, somehow them being separated allowed a whole different kind of exploration for them, unexpectedly for us, so it lasted longer.
Yeah.
But then other things like Philip, does anybody, people who watched, they don't mind spoilers? Okay, good. Philip marrying Martha, that we knew from the beginning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you talk about how you sort of paced Suits with, your main character has sort of a secret that he's hiding from his...
He's hiding the fact that he's a fraud, and he also, had smoked a lot of pot in the pilot. I won't comment on that. No, but he smoked a lot of pot in the pilot. I'll give an example from the first season. I had thought at the end of the first season his grandmother was going to die, and that was going to cause him to start smoking pot again. And he ended up smoking pot episode 2 again, and his grandmother didn't die until like episode 9, season 2. So we map it out at the beginning, but as you're kind of feeling your way through, it's the same thing. You get there and you're like, it doesn't feel right. It feels like that thing should be delayed, or it feels like that other thing should move up. And then oftentimes we come up with something we hadn't thought of, and we think, okay, we had a big thing. Donna got fired last year, one of our main characters. And it was in the middle of breaking the episode. I pitched something. I was like, wait a minute, shouldn't she do this? And then John Cowan, one of our other writers, said, well, if we're going to do that, she has to get fired. And we all looked at each other like, are we allowed to do that? We didn't even know if we were allowed to do that. But we decided we were, and we called the network and studio. They were very supportive, as they always are. So, yeah, it's a feeling your way through process.
Isn't that the most? I'm sorry, but isn't that the most fun when you surprise yourself? I mean,
I say that's the most fun to me of writing is, yes, thinking of something that you're like, wait a minute, we thought of that? That's pretty cool, yeah.
Well, I think we had that moment when we realized Philip was going to kill Amador. Here was a series regular, and we were halfway through the first season, and we realized, well, if they confront each other, there's only one way this can go.
I think about all your shows, you have a real distinctive sort of visual signatures to your show, elements that Bates Motel has a look, Elementary has almost a sepia tone to it sometimes. It really, is that something that you work with your DPs and your directors and your production designers to really ensure that the show has? Do you think it's important in this, world of 500 channels to have that?
Yes. You were creators. You were painting a picture. Particularly with a pilot. It's very, very important to paint a picture. And so so you're involved in the color choice of the wall and the DP. We're handheld. It's to mimic the Ryan Hardy's heart. Everything's uneasy. Everything's on tension filled. Everything is you're off kilter completely all the time.
Yeah, and for us, we wanted Norma and Norman Bates to feel out of time. So when you watch the beginning of the Bates pilot, you almost feel like you're in a period show. They're driving a period car, and it isn't really until you're a few minutes in and Norman is sitting in this bus stop and he's got iPod,
excellent.
Headsets
His mood and tone is beautiful in that show.
And it just that we wanted their relationship to feel like it was out of time, but then all of a sudden it would collide with the modern contemporary world. So it was very conscious, and obviously the iconic Bates house and motel were part of that choice.
Joel, did you have to do a primer on the 80s for people?
Well, for us, cinematically, we talked a lot about the iconic films of the late 70s and that sort of very realist style where you felt like you were there.
Like 3 Days of the Condor.
3 Days of the Condor, even All the President's Men, Clute. And so trying to capture some of that. I think the standard's really high in television right now. People expect a cinematic experience, and it's great, but it's really hard work, and it's fantastic to be working at a time when the standard is high, the expectation's high, and so you get involved in all those choices.